Items get extremely lonely in Ponytown. What I mean by that is if you have a single item like this rock right here just off to the side by itself, it doesn't look very good. It definitely could use some kind of improvement, and the question is, how do I improve it? Well, the answer is to just add a couple of items. As you can see, all I've done is place a tree and a piece of grass right there, and it looks a million times better. As a matter of fact, I can even remove that piece of grass, and it still looks much better than it would if the rock was there alone. The only exception to this may be like trees, but even then, as you can see, by adding a couple of items, the tree itself looks a million times better. This is something you can accomplish even with a small item limit because sometimes it only takes a single item. If I get rid of the tree, this rock still looks much better by itself with that piece of grass there next to it. So even with a small item limit, you can still make great changes to your island and make awesome builds. But what are some other tips we have? Well, let's look at this item right here, this single lonely onion ring. The next tip I have for you is basically to look at an item and pretend it's something else, or at least come up with an idea of an item that you need and just look through the build menu until you find something that you can pretend is that item. So let's play a little bit pretend. We have an onion ring here, which is very much an onion ring or an onion slice, whatever they want to call it in the build menu. And all I've done is place a single carpet down, get some icicles down, and boom, we got a spooky little creature there. Obviously, I can make this much better. Maybe I can give them like little arms made of sparklers or something like that, but this is a very basic thing that you could do. Those onion rings are now eyeballs, and it looks crazy. I can even throw in some berries or something in there, and it might look even better. There's a lot I can improve on this, but literally just a couple of items can make this look much better. This kind of goes back into the other tip as well, but we're pretending that this onion slice is eyeballs. Something else that we can pretend that the onion slices are gold. So now, with the context of this crate, the trophy, some yellow pepper slices in there, suddenly the onion ring kind of just looks like a gold ring all of a sudden, except you can eat it for some reason. And the pepper slices themselves now look like gold bars because we're pretending that it is and we're giving it context. So if you want your items or your builds to look better, by pretending there's something else and then give them context to make sure that people understand what it's supposed to be. Next up, we can take a look at the main map and get an idea or inspiration for other ideas. Essentially, we can just look through here and be like, okay, yeah, rocks look good with leaves and plants and stuff like that. They always look good together. That's a good idea. Maybe if I have a box of lanterns, I could put a couple lanterns next to it. Bushes. Again, Ponytown themselves know that items get lonely, so with very few exceptions, like shells being on the beach by themselves, items are always next to another item. For example, we have two bushes here, etc., etc. So really, this tip here is basically to just look on the main map and get an idea of what looks good next to other things, because if it doesn't look good next to something else, the Ponytown devs are probably not going to put it on the main map, if that makes sense. So we can see here, this log always looks good next to a pillow and maybe a lantern or something like that. So as you can see, just do a little bit of exploring and you'll very quickly realize certain items just always look good next to each other. Here's another example right here. Benches are usually accompanied by rose bushes because they always look good next to each other. Small things like that is something that can help you greatly because it is something that just always looks good next to something else. So if you're just trying to throw down a couple of items or something like that, maybe you want to fill out a space or something that looks empty, it will greatly improve your builds. And so here's a couple of other examples. If you have a plate, you can put a pitcher on top of it and it suddenly looks much better than if it would otherwise. If you have one of these tins, if you have a large tray, it always looks good with a teapot and some tea around it because these items just go together. Another great example is a knife. A knife will always look good next to a skull because it just creates a story. It creates something that just looks good together. These small things like this will always look good next to each other, and so that is another great tip for you. Something else you can do is just look for the shape of an item. Let's say I want to make a bumblebee or something like that on my island. I don't know even where to start. I could use some berries or something like that, but really I just need that kind of round oval shape. Well, look no further than the pepper slice. It's ovalish shape. There might be better shapes. I think I've seen people use sparklers as bumblebees and stuff in the past, but for this example, let's just pretend we settled on the pepper slice, for example. The next thing you need to do is see if you can change the color of it to the color you need, and so let's say I am doing the bumblebee. Let's try to change the color of it. I can make it yellow. We knew that from previously because I technically did that over here, but now that we have the shape of the bumblebee, we have the color of the bumblebee, we need to add a wing, and so I can again look at the build menu and just look through here and see if I can find something that looks a little bit like a wing, or at least the color of a wing, because we really need that shape. You know what I'm saying? Like the shape of a wing. So if we scroll through here long enough, we might find something like this garlic clove, which kind of looks like a wing by itself if we're really being honest. So if I put that on here, we can see that if I throw that on there, suddenly without much work, it actually looks a lot like a bumblebee. Maybe I can throw a second one on there. I'm really not sure if the second one makes it look better or worse, to be honest with you. But either way, just these two things by themselves suddenly make this look much better, and we're getting that shape and that concept of the bumblebee made out of different items. This is how people do this when they're doing these crazy huge builds that like look like something that should not exist, or it looks like a custom item or something like that. All they're doing is taking the shape of items, they're looking for shapes of items, and then they're combining it with other shaped items, and then they're just making sure the colors work, and then boom, you have an excellent item. Super awesome tip there for you guys. And something else here, and this one is a huge one, and that is to do with layering. Honestly, I can make an entire video about layers themselves. So basically, to make it short, some items will always layer over others, and some will always layer underneath others. Always, no matter what. For example, we have some tables, and this is a huge tip here for you too, by the way. If you want tables to have an item on them, ignore all of these tables here that you see on screen right here. Ignore this one, that kind of looks like a bench, and it technically is a table, not a bench. This is a table, the coffee table, the small table. All these tables suck because you can't even put a piece of paper on there. As you can see, it just will layer very awful. Now, there are some exceptions. There are some things you could put on these tables. For example, I can put like this picture on here, but for the most part, these tables are extremely difficult to work with, and so I definitely don't recommend using them because, I mean, as you can see, you can't even put a piece of paper on them. So I would avoid these. The only exception to that would be if you wanted to rotate them. So if I rotate this, suddenly the layering is different, and now I can put something way up here if I wanted to, or even this piece of paper can now finally go on that table. Same thing with this. If I do this, now the paper can go on the table, and same thing with this. I can now put the table on, or the paper on that. So if you are going to use tables, the three that I definitely recommend never to use is these three right here. You can ignore the other three or whatever. You can technically use those because you can make them work. I still would try to avoid them if you wanted to put stuff on them. But these three tables right here, period, no matter what, absolutely nothing, literally nothing in the game will layer over top of this except for items like the icicles. So if I just grab an icicle down here, this will technically layer over it because everything, it layers over top of everything. There's definitely some things like that that will always layer over top of others. So if it's a wall item, you can kind of put it on the table, which is another tip in of itself. So if you wanted to put like papers or something like that on this, you could technically open up your build menu and then go over to wall items and scroll until you see like this, for example. This poster, boom, you can put that on there technically, or like this, you can put that on there technically, or you can put like this note on there, which looks really good, but just make sure if you do that to like make sure the player can't go behind it. So pretty much, unless it's a wall item, you cannot put anything on these three tables, and so I would very much avoid those three things. So yeah, that is definitely my last tip there for you, is to just make sure you learn what layers over what. Learning the layers is a super important part of building, because you're gonna think of an idea. You're gonna think of like, what if I had like this thing stabbed in the ground and like I put like snow underneath it to make it look like it's actually digging in the ground. Well, if you do that with sparklers, it's not gonna work. You literally cannot do it that way. You're gonna have to use something else. I would recommend using like rocks or something, because it's gonna be the only thing that's gonna layer properly. These snow piles are really hard to work with in that vein. You can kind of get it to work if you lay it, like move it like way down here or something, but it just doesn't look right. So some things layer over others, and it's super important to learn what layers over what and how they do. So those are 5 main tips there for you in Ponytown to greatly improve your building experience. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, please do consider liking, subscribing, sharing, and doing all of those wonderful things like that. Because when you do wonderful things like that, not only do you get access to wonderful content such as this, but you also get to become wonderful yourself. And I think we all want that. So do those wonderful things, and until next time, stay wonderful.